And we're live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate romanticism through many creative outlets and passionate people doing some incredible things. Hello, I am Practically Imperfect. I am Trey, and I am joined by my forever co-host, Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi. I'm also rather imperfect. But I'm going to own it. I'm going to own it.
Yes, own it. So I would kind of like to really just dive in tonight to our fantastic guest for this evening, who has already given us a lot of nuggets of wisdom, even during the pre-show. Emily, would you do the honor of introducing this incredible guest of ours?
Yes, I'd love to. Tonight, we are chatting with someone who's kind of known for diving right into life and living it, which is what I love about her. She's a multi-talented and infinitely passionate person, but you might know her mostly for her sculpting and her chainsaw artistry. She's also an independent filmmaker, an art director, and a vlogger. Please welcome Griffon Ramsey.
Hi.
Yay!
Thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here.
How is Alaska?
Alaska was amazing. I totally fell in love immediately. And, they're one of the worst times of year, I suppose, like February.
Sure.
But I saw the Northern Lights. And I now feel like every person on the planet should have that experience.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you said that, and my partner and I are actually planning to go there to Iceland specifically for the Northern Lights. So I'm so happy you said that.
Yeah, they're magical, and I would love to go back and actually be prepared to go hunt for them in the evening. But the way it was working, all my really warm clothes I used in the daytime while I was working, and all of my layers. But by the end of the day, by going in and out of doors, the powder and the snow would like melt, and then refreeze and melt and refreeze until it was all pretty saturated. So, by the time I got back to the hotel after working in negative 30-degree temperatures for 14 hours. And I really wanted to see the lights, but I only had some, my thin sort of civilian clothing or whatever. And I could not be out for more than a few minutes at a time just because I was dying. So it's a shame. But next time when I go back, I'm going to be more prepared.
Yeah, minus 30 is brutal.
Oh, that was a really interesting experience. And since then, the other day, it was like 20 degrees out here and people are complaining. And I feel like I have a totally different perception of 20, 30-degree weather now that I've been in negative 30 as far as what cold is. Like, it's not that it's warm, but that level of cold is like unreal. Like, you go outside and like it hits your lungs and it hurts and everything's so hard. Takes so much energy and effort, and you're breathing, everything takes effort. It was cool. I kind of love those extreme weather challenges with other chainsaw carvers, because we do this like trauma bonding together, where like we survived this, great ordeal. Like, it's cool.
That is cool. And yeah, I'm in Minnesota, so I know minus 30, and I also know the Northern Lights. And I'd say anybody should experience both.
Yeah, I didn't realize you can get them that far south.
Yeah, they're not maybe as bright, and I can watch. Here's a tip for everybody listening. You can predict Northern Lights by watching the news for sun flares. And usually shortly after sun flares are Northern Lights. So especially larger sun flare episodes create better Northern Lights. And the better Northern Lights are the ones we can see here because they come down from the north.
Oh, that's cool. Well, so apparently, when that was happening in Alaska, there have been some solar flaring, and that all around the world, they were getting really extreme Northern Lights. Like one woman that lives up in Alaska, she's a chainsaw carver. She was telling me in the 15 years she's lived there that it was like the best show she'd seen. So I felt super lucky, because there were some carvers that have been to that event and have been there several years in a row and never seen them.
Oh,
but so
wow.
that negative 30 and that clear, when the sky is clear, it gets colder, right? So it was that cold weather. The reward for that was that Northern Lights, right? Because it was all happening because the skies were so clear and so cold.
Yeah, for sure. The sky has to be. You're not going to see it through the clouds. But yeah.
But you got to pay for that. Pay and pain.
So what we're saying is go out to Alaska, stand in minus 30-degree weather, and then you're going to see Northern Lights.
I was in Fairbanks, and there's some local tradition, because there's a university there, and there's a sign in front of the university. And if it gets to negative 40, you're supposed to go and take off your clothes and get a photo with the sign. And so I was 10 degrees off of participating in this weird Fairbanks, Alaska nudity thing. Or I don't know, maybe they just tell like newbies that to see if you do it. I'm not sure.
Well, even here, there are people that will go in their sauna or hot tub and then get out and go make snow angels.
Okay.
So it's
Well,
a thing.
That's good for the heart, I think, right?
I hear that it's good for longevity. Yeah. Archer in the chat says, I mean, I've done it. Yeah, heart, lungs, skin.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Or maybe they just mean if you can survive this, you're probably one of those people that's going to survive a lot of things.
Right.
Though I hear if you're going to do cold dipping, I was watching something recently that you want to ease in, you don't want to jump in. I know a lot of people jump in because they don't want to do that painful ease in process, but that can actually really be bad for your heart if you're not prepared. That's what I hear.
I feel like jumping in feels a little more nightmarish too.
I think that might be more for those real ice cold dip. You know what I'm talking about? Like
right.
Where you go do the full submerge in like ice water. I'm not sure. Maybe Archer 33X knows.
The polar plunge. Yeah, they do this up here where they go and just leap into the ice cold water. And that is no, thank you.
Yeah, I would think it would take a lot of double daring to get me to do that.
A lot. If you're ever in Minnesota, we know where to go.
So my family's both sets of both sides of the families come through Minnesota at some point in the immigration process to Oregon, where I grew up. Awesome.
So you've got a little Minnesota blood in you.
Oh yeah, I suppose so. Well, I heard about it a lot growing up. Like my mom would tell me all of the amazing stories about snow, like making tunnels in the snow and fireflies and all these magical ideas. But I didn't see fireflies myself until I moved to Texas like 22 years ago.
Oh,
because we don't have them in Oregon. Yeah.
No fireflies in Oregon.
No, it's a very magical place except for that one thing.
I didn't know about that. I have a cousin in Oregon, and I don't remember seeing fireflies when I visited, but interesting.
But we don't have any gigantic cockroaches, so you have sort of a trade there.
Oh.
Huge trade.
Yeah.
Huge trade.
I think the thing that I will never quite get used to living down in the South are those, like, the difference between, like, cockroaches and palmetto bugs. Because either way, I don't like creepy crawly gigantic beetle things, and I especially don't like things flying at my face. Like, absolutely not.
Well, I kept making a case for how cockroaches aren't so bad because they don't bite, but then somebody told me they do. So now I've got something to be afraid of.
Oh.
Do they bite? I heard they bite.
I've never been bitten.
I actually don't know.
I don't know. Does Archer have the answer? I feel like Archer's now our answer person.
That's Josh, our moderator, and he.
Okay, Josh.
I don't know. Like I know Trey lives near Charlotte, and I used to live there too, which is how we met. And there are tons of roaches, palmetto bugs, whatever you're calling them, but I never had one bite me. There was a time in Florida that I had the place I was staying at. They came up out of the drain in the bathtub, and let me tell you, I've never not wanted to shower more in my life.
No.
Yeah, and they were like, "Oh, they do that all the time," and I was like, "What?
Oh.
No.
How is this normal to you?"
That's some it level scary.
Yeah, nightmare fuel.
For our listening audience, according to Orkin.com, they say that they are not likely to bite humans, but they will in cases of large infestations where food is scarce. So.
Whoa! So keep them fed, keep them fat and happy.
Oh God.
Well, usually, I mean, they're not going to be in your house unless you've got something attracting them, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So
maybe though, I don't know. There's some apartments I lived in. I think that maybe they were load-bearing cockroaches.
Right.
They're built into the walls. They would just come out. They were not scared. They would just I would throw things at them. They would just hang out like they were not intimidated by humans. That was in San Marcos, Texas. That was when I first really did become familiar with that kind of bug. But you do kind of get used to them, I think.
Sure, like any creature anywhere you live, right?
I didn't plan to spend this much time on your romantic podcast discussing disgusting cockroaches.
Things like this happen and we just roll with it because, it's part of life and you never know what's going to come up on this podcast, right, Trey?
No. Well, I think that also kind of speaks to just like the multiplicity of lives and that sort of thing. And kind of along that topic, as we were hinting at in your introduction, you do so many different things. You, like Emily said, you dive right into life. You you do so much that I don't think that we could fit it all in one sentence comfortably. So I just want to ask you one simple question. Is there anything you can't do?
Well, there's plenty I can't do. I don't tend to advertise it, well, for instance, I was talking about this today. There was a couple when I was first started, I went into business for myself about 12 years, back in 2012, I think officially I started my LLC, which is just my name really. But I decided I was going to learn how to do my own accounting, which is the last thing I want to do ever, 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 ever. So I started putting all my receipts in jars. And then 2 years later, I'm like, okay, and I've collected all of them. I've done step one. But so there's certain things where I do love to be passionate about life and I get excited and interested and I do lots of creative things and I like to do that. But when it comes sometimes just to basic practical things that some people find very easy, I find so challenging.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've really benefited over the years by getting somebody who's a lot more like type A and really organized. And I've done my business has thrived the most when I've found good people, usually it's a woman who's real organized and on top of her shit. And that's the sweet spot for me. I found keeping the business really small, but having somebody with a brain. Not to say I have a brain. I would say none of them don't not have a brain, but
Sure.
can keep their life together and help me keep my head together. The only problem is that they find it very challenging sometimes for me to be the boss, but they have to manage me, but then I resent the management of it. So that's where it gets tricky.
It's a balance, yeah.
Yeah, I was hanging out with a friend today and I kept saying I needed to get this invoice sent. And he was just he started reminding me and I'm like, you don't want to be this person in my life where you are trying to help me by reminding me to do the things I don't want to do, because then I'm just going to get annoyed with you. I'm sorry I keep repeating myself, but you probably just want to be my friend and you're not going to want to try to be my, I don't know, just because I automatically rebel sometimes against myself or what I should be doing. That's the thing I found when it comes to having a lot of interests. I like it because it keeps the energy and the momentum up. So if you hit a wall or you get lose your inspiration or you need to go back to the drawing board on something, instead of letting it stop me, I'll then bounce off to the other things I have to do. And so that keeps the energy going. So I don't just stop and get derailed, but I can be a little bit scattered in that sense. So one thing I've really been starting to learn over the years is just how to narrow down a little bit or try not to get so distracted by every little fun idea, or put it in a place where I can come back to it later. Because I find that when you're really busy, that's when you get all the ideas. It's because it's gets your brain going and then suddenly you have an idea for something totally unrelated, but you don't have the time to work on that. So just being able to put it someplace where acknowledge it, but don't get distracted by it. And that's easier said than done. So that's what I'm not very good at, is that just do one thing at a time, organized thing. I'm a little bit more of a that squirrel chaser.
I can relate to this.
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to this. The times you're totally right about how you'll be in the middle of something that is consuming, but since your brain is activated, those are when the ideas come, and it's hard not to squirrel. For
yeah,
sure.
Especially if you've been working on that damn thing forever and you're tired of it and you want to go do something new. I love launching things, and that's another thing, that long-term grind. I've discovered over the years that I do much better with project-based work, and even in the future, thinking about things that could be a longer form content, like a podcast or something, I probably would still make it a finite thing or decide this is what I consider success and complete versus ongoing with no end date. I think it's better for me to work in bursts of energy than I don't know. So you just have to learn how to work with yourself, I guess.
Yeah, knowing when to roll with motivation and
knowing what your attention span is too,
Yeah.
and trying to design your work in life based on how your mind and your attention span works a little bit, as much as you can, can get away with that, I suppose. Not everyone has that luxury. Not every field has that luxury.
Sure. That's true. Sorry, this is one of those moments where I can't tell if Trey was about to ask a question or not.
Nope.
So one thing that I wanted to talk about, because this is something that I guess sounds pivotal to me, but what made you pick up a chainsaw?
Oh, well, that's kind of a long story, but we have some time, right?
Of course.
All right, so I grew up in Oregon, and I come from, and some of my family or my ancestors and everything were there as like loggers and horse loggers. And so I grew up in this lumber area, kind of with logging in the family. And my grandfather on my mother's side, who was a welder by trade, but he whittled in his spare time for fun. And so as a small child, I was like fascinated by wood carvings. And he was that inspiration of that. He did like little cowboys, and he did everything with knives and like traditional tools. I don't have as much patience by nature, and I like to, like I have bursts of energy, so I have to work fairly quickly before I get distracted. And so I've found that power tools, I prefer power tools because of time saving and just power, I suppose. It's really powerful to be able to just manifest your idea into an actual solid form in a relatively short amount of time. That's kind of like wizardry, in my opinion,
Yeah.
So he's the one who first, I guess, when I first saw wood carvings and just fell in love with wood itself. And that kind of maintained it's been true my life. But when I would ask him to show me how to do it, I was just a little kid, and I would cut myself or wouldn't be able to finish to get very far, and I'd give up on it. And so I didn't really learn how to do wood carving then, but I became kind of interested in those first early years. And so later on, years later, I was 30, 31. I was leaving a job building sets and props and costumes and things like that for online content. And so I was already making props and making objects and stuff for YouTube. And so when I went off on my own, I wanted to start my own YouTube channel. And I decided then I really wanted to try chainsaw carving because at the time, Gears of War 3 was coming out, and there was that chainsaw gun in the game, like the Lancer, I think it's called, something like that. And so I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to like try chainsaw carving for the first time? I got to rewind. Sorry, I told the story out of order.
That's okay.
The chainsaw carving interest, I grew up about 45 minutes from the Oregon coast. And on the Oregon coast, chainsaw carving, kind of tourist sort of thing. Like there's art galleries and gift shops and people carving. And I remember in like one of my favorite movies as a kid, Overboard with Kurt Russell. At the very beginning of the movie, I don't know if anyone remembers, he's chainsaw carving. He's this sort of, handyman. He's doing odd jobs, whatever. So he's chainsaw carving in like the first scene. So yeah, that was kind of what it was like on the Oregon coast, at least in the 80s and 90s, all these chainsaw carving galleries. And so the first time I saw like a totem pole at this place called Sea Gulch, which is just on the coast in like outside of Walport, I was just like mesmerized. And so in the back of my mind, it was always there. And I always wanted to try it. But then when I decided to try it, finally, when the Gears of War 3 came out and I wanted to launch this YouTube channel, so I'm like, well, that would be a really dramatic way to launch a YouTube channel with a chainsaw. And so that was the first try. And it was only meant to be a one-off, but it's very addictive. So if you do pick up a chainsaw, you might become addicted to it. If you love that, loud energy, like it's very cathartic too. If you're ever like pissed off and want to express yourself creatively, the chainsaw is also perfect.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very satisfying. It's very satisfying.
I never thought about it being addictive. That's cool though.
Well,
it's a good addiction.
Well, yeah, like it's, I took a bit of a break this last year. I started doing some other things and bringing money in other ways. And I was getting kind of burned out by 2019 because I was really working all the time on it. And so I haven't really been carving as much, you may have noticed. And then recently, because of that ice carving competition, I'm like, I don't want to show up and be so like out of practice. So I said yes to this wood carving thing, Burning Bear up in Washington, went up there and did some wood carving just to kind of get back in the groove. And the amount of joy I felt again, just in the sculpting process, I don't know, just like letting your mind like letting your mind flow over like a solid material and just watching the shapes like emerge out of that. Like getting back to that wizardry, I do think that that's something I love so much about sculpting and building, I guess, is that your ideas can become a solid form.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about like when I make costumes and I start sewing. Like I understand that I'm putting pattern pieces down on fabric and I'm cutting out the fabric, but it's really not until I start to see it really take shape that it really starts to be like, oh my God, I made that. And like, oh
Yeah.
my God, the idea that was in my head is now becoming tangible and I can like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God.
It's really a powerful feeling, I think, you know.
It definitely is.
For sure.
Someone has a question here. Josh, I guess you said?
Yeah.
Josh asked, do you have a preferred species of wood for the carving? So that it's not a, yes, there's certain wood is better for carving than others, and some is not really that carvable as far as detail and holding, especially fine details. Depends on the grain and everything. So I use mostly cedars, or at least in Texas, the variety I use the most and is the best to use is Eastern red cedar. And so a lot of my work has that red, that deep red color. And that's not totally by choice. That has to do with where I'm at. It has, as far as romanticism goes, I do think it has given my work a certain look compared to some of my friends up in like Pennsylvania that are using white pine. But I also, in Texas, there's cypress. And so if I ever get a chance to use cypress, I love it because it is more like that, like light color, like pine, where it's like a blank canvas. So for experimenting with paints and stains and finishes and stuff, a lighter wood is sometimes nice because then you have that, you can kind of impose any idea on it. The Eastern red cedar is so red that sometimes it'll conflict with like a finish or a color I may want to use, or I have to really consider how it's going to look when it's, because like I might put this color on it, but that red is going to change the outcome. So not exactly about preference other than cedar is what I do prefer, and a lot of carvers do prefer to use cedar. But what I like about this, especially when it comes to the travel aspect, I get to go to a lot of shows. Most of the chainsaw carving world, when it comes to these events, it's usually invitation only. And so you have to kind of, it's like being a gigging musician. The more you play, the more you play. You know, like
Yeah.
the more you're out there, you're meeting people, and then you get to the next one. And so every time I go to an event, I tend to pick up, if somebody tells me about another event, or they see my work and they invite me, or we hit it off or something. And so what I love about that, other than travel and adventure, is I get to try the different varieties around the world. And so when I'm in Germany, I carve oak. You know, when I'm in Scotland, I carve spruce.
Cool.
You know, Georgia, maybe some yellow pine. And that's kind of part of the fun of the adventure. Like Australia, this really beautiful cypress that I think originally was from California, but now grows all over like Australia. And it's got this real turpentine scent, but it's really beautiful to carve. And so I've had these favorites. Like I love that cypress in Australia, you know, but that's, I'm sure there's going to be more. Oh, I do have an answer for you, Josh, actually. When I was in France, I got to try Lebanon cedar. And then speaking of romance and the passion and the excitement around the work, because of chainsaw carving, which is the weird, you know, you think of like the state fair little square bears or whatever, this weird niche, and I don't know, a nice, very really rural kind of thing. It has taken me all over the world. And this one event in France was this residency where we were invited to go sculpt at a vineyard and live in a castle in the French Pyrenees for 2 weeks. And I was the only chainsaw carver. They'd never had a chainsaw carver. They're all like French traditional chisel. So they're all like tap, 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 chisel, chisel, chisel. They've got like this huge amount of time to get this job done. And then I'm making a ton of noise, and I felt bad because they were trying to have a nice time. Ton of noise, but then I'm done in 3 days because that's the pace I'm used to working at with these large scale things in the chainsaw. So then I start adding on chunks of wood. But we got a pull from the giant wood pile. And this Lebanon cedar smells more amazing than any kind of wood I've ever smelled. It's so aromatic, so like incensey. And a lot of cedar is, but this was just this special, I can't even describe it. And then come to find out, one of the French artists there, he was like, oh yeah, you know, the cedar of Lebanon, like it's in the Bible, it's like what the Temple of Solomon was built out of. Like it just had this beautiful story and this beautiful setting. I felt like I was in like Fable, you know, the video game. like that was like the courtyard, and looking out of I had like the Juliet balcony looking down, and this is all around, like just with chainsaws taking me all these beautiful places. I don't know. It's cool. Oh, but to answer your question, Lebanon cedar at this point might be the best smelling wood, and like it was beautiful to work with and felt so exotic and interesting and had that great story. It felt like spiritual.
Yeah.
That was a very, very long answer. I'm sorry, I don't give short answers.
That's okay. No, that's all right.
What do you think, out of all of the pieces that you've had the ability to carve, can you pick a favorite, or are they kind of like, are all of them kind of your favorite?
Oh, for the carvings themselves?
Yeah.
The next one. It's I would rather get all the carvings out, and so I can just look at the material, like whatever the raw. Like I get more inspired by the raw material for the thing coming up, I would say. I mean, I love some of them, and there's some I won't get rid of. I have a wooden carved pan that was one of the first things I ever made, and I will hold on to it and it's wonky. It's got one arm that's way too long, and it's like I didn't really know what I was doing. Like there's a lot of like problems with it, but there was also so much detail, because back then I was willing to spend 1 million hours with a Dremel just doing all of these little lines. And now that I've gotten better and more efficient with a chainsaw and faster and more commercial with everything, I would never spend that much time using a Dremel ever again, probably. So there's like things about it that are special. It's cool to see how far I've come. It's also interesting to see how lazy I've gotten since then, but I kind of want to keep it around just because I want to have that reminder, I guess, of the journey from then to now.
Yeah. Pan.
Well, and I love Pan.
Yeah.
I love Pan.
Of course.
I have actually a big tattoo of Pan on my back that I'm still working on.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. That was one thing that I was going to ask, is if you kept your own carvings, or are they all for another purpose, like a competition or a whatever?
Well, I have carvings I haven't sold yet. They've been around for a while, but I'm not trying to hold on to them. I have a totem pole I made like an original design, not like a Native American, but more like just a stack of animal heads and everything, that I made for my old show space back in the 2011-12 until for maybe 4 years. I had this warehouse venue in East Austin called The Fort. And we built a stage in the back, had this sort of back alley courtyard. Made that totem pole, put it back there, painted everything, and it was this grungy, like art music venue kind of space. And so I made that totem pole for that. And then when I shut that place down and just had a regular wood shop outside of town, because the rent just got way too high in Austin, so I had to kind of downsize and I just decided to focus on wood carving and not that at the time. But I took that totem pole and I have it in my yard, but eventually it will rot away. It's made out of cedar. It's lasted a while already, like 12 years or like 11 or 12 years already. And it'll probably hold up for another 7, 8, or 10 years possibly. But I'd like to try stone someday. I don't think I'd want to do it all the time, but it'd be cool to make at least one thing in my life that would outlive me, for sure.
Sure, yeah. Was there a big difference switching to ice when you tried that?
There's some things are very similar, and a lot of the tools are similar, but there's definitely a difference in how you handle the material. And that's been the thing to learn, because in some ways ice is really fantastic to work with, because it's super easy to weld together if you're in a below freezing environment anyway.
Oh, sure.
As far as like immediately being able to do add-ons with like really very little difficulty compared to wood. And it's really easy to cut and fast, but you have to remember there's certain things that stress it out and can break it. And so like I learned this lesson the hard way. I was carving in Slovakia on this big ice temple project, and I learned ice only to get that job. I had no intention to learn ice. People kept asking me if I wanted to, but because my degree and my background had been in theater and film and online stuff where I would make something and it would be torn down a week later, I had no interest in doing ephemeral stuff, because I'm like, I wanted to use wood because it was like, well, at least this will last. If I'm going to put love into it, I want it to be around for a while.
Yeah.
And so I really was not interested in ice for that reason. But then I was carving in Germany and met a bunch of Eastern European carvers, one of them from Slovakia. His name is Adam Bakoš. And I found out that he was in charge of one of those big ice projects. Like, I was always interested in those ice hotels, and that was the only caveat in my mind. Okay, I don't want to carve ice, but if I could get a job working on those ice hotels, that would change my mind. This isn't an ice hotel; it's a big church or a temple they do every year, but it was like close enough to super interesting and awesome, large scale kind of thing. And so when I heard that, I partied my way, and we just like all of us drinking by the campfire. I tend to try to be one of the last to leave the campfire at these events because I do try to get the next gig. We got pretty drunk, and I convinced him to hire me, and he said yes, I think kidding, but I made him shake on it, and I took a picture of that handshake because I knew we'd all be probably not remember that tomorrow. And then the next day I'm like, listen, you said yes, so you should. And he was like, okay, but you better learn ice. And so when I got home, I started learning with this local guy, Sean Leahy, full spectrum ice down in San Marcos, Texas, which is about 30 minutes away from Austin. So I drove down there during the Christmas season, like the holiday season, to help him just with his production. And he like offered to show me the ropes, basically. And then I went into that's full spectrum ice down in San Marcos. And then he told me about this boot camp, ice carving boot camp up in West Virginia, run by Elegant Ice Creations. They supply a lot of the tools for ice carving, and so they have this big boot camp where they can teach you, and you can buy tools and everything. I did one of those, and it was like a 3-day boot camp where you just go and carve a bunch of ice carvings with like some experts, and they show you everything. They show you the tools, and then after that, I went off to Slovakia. Oh, so the point of that story was that I embarrassed the shit out of myself because I didn't have a lot of experience, but I got this job, which is very typical of me. And most of my career is me kind of showing up often in an overly over-publicized situation where I get this great opportunity and I'm terrible and I have to just like act confident. So one thing I have gotten good at over the years is acting confident, for better or worse. Anyway, but you do gain confidence after doing that so many times. And then you're like, okay, I'll try it, whatever. I'll jump in. And so I show up and I'm trying to carve ice, but I'm carving it like wood. So I'm just trying to do one big long cut to make the outer silhouette, but it gets down to about here. And this is a pretty big piece. It's a giant mountain goat. Get down to about here. And the weight of this pulling fractured the whole thing through it. And it wasn't the end of the world, but it was embarrassing to make such a blunder, to have that job with that crew and those amazing artists, and then I'm the one doing such basic stupid shit. But so I know how to sculpt and how to remove things to make something look like something, but every material is different, and then there's always going to be those moments where you have to make mistakes to learn anything. So, but the problem is I tend to always make mistakes in front of a bunch of people.
Oh, go ahead, Trey. I'm sorry.
No, I can relate to that. I think back to like my master's recital, and it was like I had practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and then like the day of the show comes, and I get up there and I flub so many of those things. And the lie, and I will admit this here because I know my mother is not listening, the reason I didn't offer up a recording of my master's recital to anybody was simply because I just screwed up so bad on the day of. And I was just like, nope, the recording just didn't last. They couldn't get a recording. It just, nope, couldn't get one.
You're just like, this never happens. Moving on.
Wow.
Oh man, I'm so thankful that there were no like cameras on phones or even cell phones really back when I like a certain ages for me, like just that there's no record of of any of that stuff. Though it's not like my adulthood has been much different as far as, I'm sure there's plenty of embarrassing things out there on the internet, that I've put out there. But it's kind of funny to think back to a time before we had this constant record and archive of everything we were doing.
I love that you didn't stop just jumping in because of that, though.
No, I've gotten more comfortable with that than I have with probably anything else. It's the thing I've practiced the most. I love it. I do. And I will say that started at an early age when it comes to, I grew up in a very, very small, very rural. I grew up officially in an official ghost town in Oregon. Oh. And it's in the cluster of a bunch of little ghost towns. Oregon has the most ghost towns out of any state in the country, partly because of the lumber industry and the railroad. These little towns would crop up, and then the resources would be all cut down, and then they move along. So I grew up really isolated in the middle of nowhere, and then busted into a pretty small high school. But But then when I was in high school, I was able to do a foreign exchange program through the Rotary International, and they helped make that a possibility. Rotary, the youth exchange program, and so I was able to like leave my comfort zone. And around that age, I guess the whole world opened up in my eyes as far as, oh, it's totally possible to just pick up one day and go across the world, or like find some opportunity. And I guess realizing that having my eyes open at that age, it totally changed the trajectory of my life. I think that's what could have been, as far as I've recently went back to where I grew up, and just with a few little changes in my life would have had a totally different life,
Sure.
I mean, it's true for all of us, but I think that was probably when it changed for me as far as thinking, oh, your life could just be an adventure if you want it to be an adventure,
And you can just decide that. Yes.
Yeah. And then a few years later, I changed my name, which was another step in the direction of deciding I'm going to create my own identity. I'm going to, like I kind of just decided that I would, at that age, and without knowing really what I wanted to do, I guess I kind of wanted to live for the stories. And I don't know that that's changed, though. It hasn't changed in the sense that I love having stories and I want to make more of them. But I think that as I've found what I love to do, that's deepened more on a level of like, okay, there's more to it than just having adventures and living a story. There's a productivity side of that too. Like, what are you going to put back, or like, what beauty are you going to create? It may not last forever. That's, I guess, why I'm happy I do some wood, not just ice or something that disappears.
Right. You can curate that a little bit more for what story you want to create for your own life.
I guess it's like, what influence are you going to have? Do you guys like Ani DeFranco? She really puts it, there's a line in one of her songs that really sums it up that I've been thinking about lately, where she says, here, let me look it up, actually.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, this might be a good time while I'm scrolling, actually, if you don't mind.
That's okay.
I see some questions are popping up, so this might be a good let Griffon stop talking for 1 second moment, if you guys like.
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit. Sandra said that she's seen pictures of ice hotels, and they are amazing. We have a festival with ice in Minnesota here in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis. And I think this is a question for Josh because I don't remember what it's called, but I know people come from all over and do these amazing ice sculptures, and there's like ice cathedral kind of things that happen, and people come out from all over to get pictures and shoot music videos and things like that. I think he's typing.
Well, actually, so let me get back to that line of that song so we can move on from that topic real fast since I found it. Okay, so first of all, Ani DeFranco was one of those people that inspired me at a young age when it comes to that jump right in, adventure, bold female type. You can do a male-dominated, like a lot of what I've done has been in male-dominated fields too. Just like she was a major inspiration for me, actually, as far as the attitude, how to approach the world, and the way she puts things is so perfect. And in this song, Back, 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 she has this line. She says, well, I can read the whole, I almost want to read the whole song. She says, your arrogance is gaining on you, and so is eternity. You better practice happiness. You better practice humility. You took the air, you took the time, you were fed and you were free. Now you'd better put some beauty back while you've got the energy. And I like that idea of like, okay, we have this moment where we're just existing, and that's like lucky in itself. And like, it would be, we definitely create a lot of ugliness and like, single-use plastics and all of the things that we're doing even to be here. So I feel like it is on us to do something with ourselves. And that doesn't have to be art or even an object. It could even just be how we treat people, the kind of person we are, I guess. But I guess like finding what it is that you can contribute, whatever that is, and doing it to the best of your ability,
For sure. The St. Paul Winter Carnival and Minneapolis Ice Castles is what I was thinking of. Thank you, Josh.
Cool. I'd love to check out all of the weird ice places, because like the Fairbanks one, Ice Alaska, they had this big outdoor game room with like mini golf and like Connect Four and cornhole and like all of these games totally made out of ice. that you could like go and play with. Like it's
That's
kind of
so
cool, the
cool.
possibilities there. Big ice slide, you could take like sleds down.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, put some beauty back for
Yeah.
sure. While you've got the energy, that's the thing to remember. And I was reading about it and it kind of scared the hell out of me recently. Oh, you know, your earning power goes down after this age, or like this is the peak of when you can make the money in your
Yeah.
life. I'm like, oh my God. Like, but that can go for other things too. While your body is still working or while your brain is still working, you know, not just while you're alive, but when you have maybe the best use of your gifts.
Right. I think a lot of us tell ourselves, I'll do that when insert reason here. And I think few people think I should do it while I have the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, yeah, as Josh just said, carpe diem.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, definitely. And I think that it's a sad thing, but I think as when you're an adult and you start to lose people, you know, and you start to go to funerals for whatever circumstance, because that can happen even young, you know, people die young all the time. But just like those moments, as sad and horrible as they are in life, I think do become wake up moments for us, you know, as far as anything can happen at any moment. Mm-hmm. Not to be a bummer, not to be, took that one down.
That's okay. No, it's home for us because we lost one of our crew members here on the podcast in the last summer, and it was tough pulling out of that. But yeah, it would definitely wake up moment. We wouldn't have a podcast if it wasn't for him, and so the thought of picking up and moving on with the podcast without him was hard. But like we couldn't not. Because he would be really mad if we quit.
Yeah, all right. You don't want to be haunted forever.
Right, but also because I believe, you know, we believed in what we were doing. But yeah, you're right. It is eye-opening. And
there's, sorry.
No, I'm done.
There's actually a book that's kind of dedicated to that, and it's by one of my favorite authors, Sarah Addison Allen, called Lost Lake, and one of the protagonists of that talks about like kind of waking up after the death of a loved one and just fueling herself by finding what reignites her passion again. And it happens to be like other people and really being social, which she couldn't do while she was married. And so while it was very heart-wrenching, it's just, what I'm trying to say is you're 100% correct. And it was just a literary way, and there are many beautiful, beautiful things and a really, really wonderful read. So highly recommend it.
Say the title again, Trey.
Lost Lake.
Okay. I just want to make sure so our listeners can look that up. Do you find when you look at, let's say you have a piece of wood that you are about to carve, do you go into it with an idea like, oh, I'm going to make this into an eagle or something? I don't know. That's just what popped into my head. Or I'm going to make this into Avatar characters or whatever it is. I'm sure you have jobs like that, but do you look at the piece of wood and I guess I'm asking about your approach. Do you go, okay, I've been inspired by eagles, so I'm going to make this an eagle? Or do you go, okay, I see this piece of wood and to me it feels like it's an octopus?
Oh, right. Well, so it varies. Let me just first start by saying that I'm one of the world's worst eagle carvers. And I've like decided I'm going to try to avoid them in the future.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I don't need any more evidence of that out there.
Okay.
But yes, as far as examples go, it really depends on what the project is. Because if it's commercial, then it's sort of decided for me, and then I'm looking for the material that best suits that.
Okay.
And in general, I will say, partly because of my background, I have a BFA in theater with a directing and design focus from Texas State, which was a really well-rounded program, and I did have to do a lot of acting, which has helped me as far as being willing to embarrass myself publicly and the jump right in thing, you know. I know how to cheat to the camera, all of the things you have to do.
Right.
Like, it's been helpful. I'm not a very good actor. I'm terrible at pretending to be something that I'm not, but it helped me with all of that. But the The thing that it probably helped with the most, no one has ever cared that I have a degree or ever wants to see my theater degree from a party school. But I did get a process out of it, and that has helped me a lot in moments where I've had to work on creating something that I wasn't necessarily inspired to do or even thinking about at all. But once you develop that sort of creation process or learn that, like it's like the bones of everything. I can go and create something regardless if I have any personal attachment to it at all. And so I do, even for things that I am passionate about and love and I want to create that are personal and come from me, I do tend to approach everything the way I learned how to design a set in college, where, you start kind of with imagery and you go and gather images, and it's kind of like sampling. And often I won't even draw. I'll just, on my laptop, pull different images from Pinterest or other things. Like I may like the look of this hoof, or I might like, but I also want this castle background, just like, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but random stuff where I'm like, you put all these ideas together and then it's like sampling, and then that I'll just put them together and preview, line them up how I want to arrange them, take a screenshot, crop it, print that, and then hang it up. And then then I jump into sculpting. I don't even tend to draw. I'm just looking at these different things and stealing elements from them. And so that's usually how I start, regardless of what it is I'm making. And then often if I have the idea of what I'm looking for, I'll tend to go and find the material that suits that. But then sometimes I'll find awesome material or just collect material. And then I'll be either dig through the wood pile when I have an idea, or sometimes then, this is doesn't happen as often, but I will occasionally. And when it does happen, it's been great results. The wood itself will tell me what it wants to be. Like, it'll be obvious. I'll see it there, or I don't know, it just wants to be that, and in general, even if I'm imposing my idea on, or whatever somebody's idea is, onto a piece I picked for it, the part of the creation process for wood carving is this material hunt. And we talked about this a minute ago before we started recording.
Yeah.
Like, when it comes to maybe what people want to see, like on Instagram, you can put the final product, but what they don't see sometimes is just the things that contribute to the creation that most people don't even think have anything to do with it. And for carving, I love that material hunt, because that is a huge part of the creation process. Either finding the thing that will work and wants to be, or looks like it's going to have the best chance of becoming the goal, or finding some awesome thing that's screaming it wants to escape and be the thing that, like it's yelling at you almost. And either way, when you're working with wood, it's that organic sort of mystery thing where you think you have a solid log, but you dig in enough, you find a nail or a rotten hole or something, and then you're going to have to adapt. So you're still like, there's almost like a conversation with you and the material that's happening. It's not just like, I know some carvers who don't want to put up with that. They will go and they'll slab out some beautiful material, then stack it and laminate it, and it's all kiln dried and it's not going to crack, and then they can just put whatever they want specifically, and it's like they're going to make it happen. But I'm usually working more with like, mystery wood. And so There's going to be like, you have to be flexible, I think. That was also a very long answer, and I didn't even remember what the question was now.
No, it was like what you answered it, because you said sometimes the wood tells me what it wants to be. And I wondered if that was true.
It varies a lot. There's only a few times I've just gone out and I'm just like, in a frenzy, in a moment of inspiration, a sculpture takes place and I've just freestyled the whole thing. I don't tend to freestyle too much. Like, I tend to go in with a plan, research. And even with writing and stuff like that too, I tend to go in more of like a planner. I don't go and just like freestyle. But there have been some emotional moments where this is where that chainsaw is the perfect cathartic tool, where a burst of inspiration or an idea or a feeling. There was this one, I got a couple of carvings, some of my favorites I've ever done, is when I've just had this big feeling and I just had to go get this feeling out. And then the feeling became this like, one was this woman who was just like sitting like this, and her hair was just in this flume, and she was like, and it looked exactly how I felt. And then I have one that was just like a floating eyeball that's held up by tears dripping into a puddle on the floor. Like there's somewhere the feeling just bursts out, but it's relatively rare. Though I would like to explore that more and do less commercial stuff.
I would love to see what would happen if you explored that more.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings, so there'll be an endless supply of those. It's one material I'm not going to run short of.
Right. Josh said, we have a big old elm tree in the yard that needs to come down. No idea what it wants to be, but... And that was one thing I was going to ask, like, if someone has this old elm tree that's needing to come down, if you were to give advice for somebody who has a situation like that, do you go, okay, elm is really terrible for carving, or do you ever give advice or what advice would you give?
Well, I get approached by about a lot of stump carvings because, especially down in Texas lately, all the ice storms.
Oh.
People have been losing trees like crazy, and people get really attached to like their family tree in the front yard, and they have all these memories, and they love the idea of giving it a second life, which is all great. And yes, that's great. And when it happens, it's beautiful when people actually get that done. But often, especially in Texas, and this is a regional thing, not all varieties are really that carvable, or by the time they come down, they're rotten in the center. And you can maybe carve something into them because you can do that with a chainsaw, but whether or not that's going to be worth it to hire somebody, because they'll charge you for the time and carving it, fine. But if it's material that's going to disappear in a year or 2 years, it may not be worth the money. If it's if it's a stock kind of wood that's going to last a while, and then so this isn't where I would be able to give advice without having to go do the research myself,
Sure.
Because I've worked with certain varieties and I know about them as much as I've learned in 12 years. But then I will still get a hold of an old timer who's been doing it 30 years and has seen things weather over years in certain conditions, who know more. That's almost like you have to go visit your carvings over time, Mm-hmm. And so I'll ask the old timers if they know about a certain kind of wood. And one thing I found on the internet, which will help anyone who's watching this now or listening to this, you can find wood durability charts. Oh. And you have to really do some digging to find one specifically related to stump carvings and stuff. I found some weird long forum thing that I had to download, and I go and check occasionally when it comes to how things might weather. Cards will, like your tree, if you connect to the ground, it's going to rock on the ground. So you probably, if you want to sit, and if you save money on the artist, because
I hate to interrupt you. I'm sorry. We're having a technical difficulty where the audio is really choppy there. I wonder.
Let me check. It might be my shitty. Sorry.
Actually, you sound better now.
It might just be that I bumped it. Is that okay right there?
It's fine. Yeah, actually, it's perfect now. I don't know if you could rewind a sentence or two. I'm sorry. You said
where did we leave off?
You said you had to download this file, but it talked about longevity.
Yeah, there's wood durability charts will show you all the different wood varieties and about how long they might last. And elm is not a good one.
Okay.
Like elm is probably not going to last super long, but I can check my chart. We can talk about this later.
Okay, sure.
But if you do have a tree that it tends to rot from the ground up. So if you do a stump carving, you usually want to start it off the ground at several feet before you do any too much detail, because eventually you're going to probably want to cut it off and save the top part.
Okay.
But to get a carver, an artist to come to your property and work on location at your place, rent scaffolding and do all of that stuff, it adds a significant amount of money to it. You can often get the artist to then just cut it off in advance, take the material to their shop, give you a better rate for their in-studio at home kind of rate. They carve it and then they bring it back and reinstall it. And sometimes they'll even put like a steel plate between that stump or above, or find a better location, maybe out of the sun or out of standing water where it will last longer. So there's options. Often I'll convince somebody if they want a carving with their tree that I tell them is rotting and probably isn't worth it, then I'll convince them that they really want it in cedar. But then it's not quite the same because it's not that tree they loved. So, right. But there are some people who like with a beautiful oak or whatever, which is maybe totally worth it to go and do that,
Right.
So yeah, it depends on how much money you've got, like who you can find to do it, what kind of wood it is, what condition the wood is in. And it's definitely super conditional. And a lot of times too, on people's terrain, it gets real tricky even to put scaffolding up.
Oh yeah. I never even thought about scaffolding. Mm-hmm. I thought maybe a ladder.
It adds a lot of expense. It adds expense to the project,
sure.
Especially if you have to rent it. And then it's also kind of dangerous and it's more of a hassle for the artist, and they will sometimes charge a pain in the ass fee for that.
Yeah, I could see that. Sure.
So just like once I said shitty, and then now I've just gone on a whole rant, even though I told you I was going to not do that.
It's fine.
No, the floodgates have opened.
We're here for it. It's fine.
All right, you can maybe later bleep me out.
What if what if I wanted to pick up the chainsaw? Is there advice you'd give me?
Yes. Well, do it. And I think
Okay.
there need to be more women carvers, so you should totally do it.
Cool.
I would say, okay, it's not like you're picking up some cheap watercolors and a couple of brushes. There is like an initial investment, which does kind of slow people down. If you already have a saw around, depending on what you have, like that's a good place to start, or if like somebody you know has a chainsaw. But if you want to get serious about carving, or at least what you need is a small lightweight saw with a carving bar on it.
Okay.
That's because that's going to be what you're going to be able to spend hours holding and get detail out of. You don't need the biggest chainsaw in the world unless you're going to go do something where you have to really cut some big ends. Eventually, if you're into carving, you're going to own a bunch of chainsaws with different length bars, and you're going to need to rent space probably to keep them, and you're going to have all this extra stuff. It does start to add up over time, but I will say if you're an artist and you want to make money, it has the real potential for that versus like being a fine artist painter who you're competing against a bazillion painters in the world, showing people stuff they've seen a million times. Like there's a lot of opportunity in the commercial side of it because of the speed of it, the affordability of the materials, the novelty of it, and there's a whole world of it as far as live performance, which is very interesting. And I have found a lot of success in my career when it comes to the live art, doing art live as a performance, people watching your process as being a thing you can sell, which is kind of interesting. So I think chainsaw carving's got so much potential, commercial potential, and there's a lot of different ways you can approach it to make money at it.
Sure. Interesting.
I'm not saying a lot of chainsaw carvers are out there are wealthy.
Right.
But
well,
if you're an artist trying to figure out how to be an artist for a living, that chainsaw carving, you can do it.
Even if you want to do it just for you, just to like you said earlier, you said this is really therapeutic kind of to go out and because you have feelings to go out and carve a piece of wood with. And I thought this sounds appealing. And also, I'm sure there's people in our audience who would find that really fascinating and interesting to attempt, or at least maybe they've already thought of attempting that. So
it also smells amazing. The chainsaw, and I've said this a million times, so it's been heard before if you've ever listened to me talk about it. The chainsaw is the perfect tool for the impatient person. And so one thing I struggle with my attention span. If I don't get something done in 3 days, it's going to take like a year. And so it's great for that, where I can get something done pretty quickly. And that's where it is also commercially viable. But yes, even just for your own processing your own feelings. I always forget sometimes, like in the finishing process, if I'm going to paint and stain or whatever, that painting will take as long as carving did sometimes. And it's always surprising to me, and it makes me appreciate the sculpting side of it, how quick it can actually move. If even painting an object takes me as long as it did to sculpt it, that's kind of, if you think about it. And painting in general, somebody who's doing fine art, doing some painting, the layering and the drying, I mean, those things are actually pretty time consuming.
Sure.
If you want to get those feelings out fast, like carving is real fun for that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, and one thing I love about wood carving, I love that I like to touch everything. And even I had my daughter when she was little, and I'd be like, don't touch when we go into the store. Immediately, I'm just like everything. So I set a terrible example. I love that my work or my art, people can interact, they can touch, they can smell it, they can like sit on it sometimes or climb on it, depending on what it is. Like I like that's so solid and real and tangible, and it's not that sort of precious, don't touch this, we're going to keep it away from you, stand back. I like that it's nice and solid.
That's kind of how I felt about a lot of my family used to sew, and my grandmother used to make like these very intricate blankets for things. And so I think sometimes that art gets lost in like, oh, we have to like just preserve it or observe it from afar versus like, something that was beautifully handcrafted and has so much emotional attachment that you can like touch and feel and smell, and like when it just smells of like that light lavender scent of your grandma, or that's in my case at least. There's a lot wrapped up in that.
Well, the smell thing is huge, and so connected to memory, and so like sensual. I love this idea of multi-sensual art, and one thing I will say, a huge percentage of the reason I love chainsaw carving or wood carving is the smell. It's just so enjoyable. And it's carving cedar too. I know it's like bad for your lungs, but it really smells good.
I could see that for sure. It does smell good.
Throughout all of the things that you've been able to carve and have this incredible experience traveling to different places, what's been one thing that surprised you the most?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, I feel really lucky to know some really incredible artists and makers that are they're way too unknown. They deserve to really be known. And what I don't like about carving that I hope changes over time, and it is beginning to, and there's some more artists out there really doing the work for this, and television series and things like that. Some of the people that I've met around the world are like Leonardo or Michelangelo level amazing artists that can do that level of beautiful work in hours in front of your eyes. And they're in these tiny ass towns and no one's seeing them, and they're not in like a gallery necessarily. And that's like to be able to just go and consider myself peers with some of the people that I consider myself peers with. Like, we're peers and we're in the world and we're competing even sometimes, but it's not they're great, you know, like, and I guess I love to be able to like get to know these people, and also I really want the best for them, and I want everyone in the world to know about them and see what they're doing, because it's not getting enough attention.
I I have to say that I love that answer. Um, just for being in support of others, and just being a very well-renowned artist yourself, and then really bolstering those who are not well known, wanting them to be more well known, to kind of share the spotlight with you. I think that's incredible, and hats off to you. Like, thank you.
Thanks. Well, you know, some being well known doesn't have always a lot to do with how good we are at what we do. Sometimes it's how well can you balance everything else around your art and business. Do you know how to promote yourself? Are you keeping in tune with the recent best practices for Instagram? Which I'm not, and I really actually need to take some time in the near future to go and relearn all of the things that I thought I knew, because you know, like you were talking about earlier, Emily, not only do you have to learn how to do all of this yourself, to do your business or your art or put it out there. All these things, you be a marketing genius, be a business person, all of these things, know how to do technology. You also have to constantly retrain, because the technology and the platforms are changing constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really be so time consuming. And a lot of my artist friends, they do not have the patience. They do not have the self absorption. They don't feel the need, or they don't have the skills, or they're not plugged in that way. And so that's why maybe they're not being seen as much. And for better or worse, I understand why a person would be like, no, it should be about the art. The art should speak for itself. I don't want to walk around promoting myself all the time. But the reality is, we have these tools at our fingertips, and we're competing suddenly with a whole world of people who have them. And sometimes you do have to learn how to do things other than the thing the people who are getting the attention, sometimes those people who might be hypothetically better at a craft might get mad or get like, why are they getting all this attention or whatever, but they're not paying attention to all the extra work that person is doing in ways like that they're not aware of, or they're unwilling to do. Like, I overheard one time this one carver complaining about how this other carver had such an advantage because his wife was like an equal part of the business and promoting him and doing all this stuff and setting up jobs and taking pictures of his stuff. And he's like, I can't get my wife to do that. Like, why won't my wife do that? His wife had a full-time job. And in my mind, I'm like, just run your own Instagram. Like, why would she do it? Like, yeah, like, if you complain, yes, the couples that work together and they've got two people working on it, of course, have an advantage. But there's nothing stopping this guy from learning, other than he felt like somebody else should be doing it for him.
Right.
So,
it's hard to have an art mind and a business mind.
oh yeah,
And for some people, yeah. Sorry.
That not only is it that those are strengths, that it's hard to have both those strengths, but those two brains are actually actively fighting each other sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, your business mind will actually be absolutely against your artist mind. And it's like a battle, like, to make a choice of what's going to creatively be fulfilling versus what's going to pay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because not every artist even wants to monetize it, but maybe would at least like the public recognition for it. But like you said, getting it out there on Instagram or wherever is somehow a battle too.
Yeah. Well, wait, what did you say just before the battle thing?
Um,
Now you got to rewind. I don't remember. I have like goldfish
I
memory.
said, I was talking about having an art mind versus a business mind. I said, some people just want to do it for themselves and would like maybe the public recognition, not necessarily to monetize it.
Oh, art. Okay. So your point on artists don't even necessarily want to make the money, but they want the recognition. That has been used against artists for the beginning of time to lure them into doing things against their interests by telling them that it's for exposure.
Yep.
But here's the case that I've found when it comes for artists or people who get attention for their talents. We are living in a world where if you are willing to learn these tools and put yourself out there and grow your own audience, that you now are able to sell that exposure to these companies. And that's where this branded content, getting sponsorship game is interesting, because finally the artist, it's like, over time, if you put your work out there and you put yourself out there, you will accumulate interest from the people in your world who meet you in real life or find you online somehow. And artists and creators and musicians and the flashy types do tend to accumulate attention over time. And so, yes, they're also seeking that attention. This is how they get taken advantage of for these exposure deals. But now, if you can get good at this stuff and build your audience, you can start to do things in the other way around. You don't want to lose your audience, so you have to be genuine about it. But a lot of companies, at least, it's not the 90s where if you make any money at your craft, you're considered a sellout by your audience. I think the audience is now, no, if you want your favorite podcaster to keep podcasting, you better go support their Patreon, or they're going to have to go get a day job. Like if you want this thing that's been given to you for free all the time, then you have to actually support the artist. And I think the companies too are understanding we can't force this artist to suddenly abandon their whole identity and thing for our little pitch if it loses the eyeballs we're trying to buy. So it's kind of interesting, I think, and it's getting really good. There's a real sweet spot right now for people who want to create, because the companies are more understanding than ever, and so are their fans.
Yeah. And I think at least my personal struggle was not recognizing that maybe some of the behind the scenes things were things people would actually want to see. Like I'm sitting editing a photo or in Photoshop, or I'm creating a dress in the sewing room for a photo shoot, and I'm just struggling getting a pocket in the seam, and I'm not thinking about filming that. I'm thinking about how I have to hurry and do this so I can make dinner and eat, and the cat's whining and the dog's barking and so I'm not thinking about, oh, maybe this is something an audience would want to see. No, but I think it was John Burroughs we had on, I want to say it was him. He was a blacksmith. And he was talking about just filming the stupid mundane stuff actually has gotten him a lot of interest from his fans, because they get to see the nitty gritty everyday stuff that it's not the glamorous side, but it's something that of interest to them. They're seeing him, get dirty by cleaning a thing or whatever part of the process they're seeing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that I think it's like the circumstances things are made in, the person behind it. I love seeing where artists are working, their space. There's a thing in Austin called the East Austin Studio Tour, which has changed a lot over the years, and it's not the same as it used to be. But when I first was living in Austin and it was the early days, you would go into people's like backyards or into their like little room in their house, and like you were kind of welcomed into their actual maker space, not like a gallery. And so you could see where all these things were happening.
Cool.
And it was the weirdest spaces, not like art galleries at all. And that was like such an intimate connection to the creators, to see not just the work they did and to meet them face to face and see them face to face, but also just like their little kitchen studio or whatever it is that they're, because most amazing, a lot of amazing, awesome things are made in somebody's apartment with a piece like a tarp on the floor because they can't afford to get a workshop or whatever,
Yeah.
But it's cool. Mm-hmm. But, and also just what keeps the artist going. We were talking about this before we started. Like I've been doing too many stories and not enough posts on Instagram. And I know that I'm not doing the Reels thing, and I should be doing the Reels thing. But the stories I've enjoyed so much because I don't have to commit to this cool thing I think is funny, like this graffiti in this alley that I think is cool and I want to show you. I can't post that on my main thing and say this is me and whatever, like, but I want to show it because it's churning, it's getting me flowing into my ideas. And I find I like the stories because it's like I don't have to think about the brand. I can just think about like what's keeping the energy going.
The snapshot of in your brain at the moment. Yeah.
Well, I'm bringing everyone along for that too.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed at when you get the high engagement, it's always kind of surprising what it is that gets people going. I did this is a random thing. I do a lot of my work in my bed, especially during the pandemic. I was just like doing all my laptop work and I'm drawing or doing whatever. And I left a Sharpie without the cap on sitting on my bedspread and it made this huge purple
stain.
And it was white, so I could bleach it. So I took it downstairs and I had one of those Clorox bleach, those little squeezy tube spots in your Clorox. So I took one of those and I smeared it on and I recorded the process. I'm like, at Clorox versus at Sharpie, like battle, see who wins or whatever. And it was just like a dumb thing while I'm doing laundry. But I had the most engagement on that.
Cool.
Like it was crazy, like more than I found on anything related to carving in forever. It was because it's so commonplace that everyone can relate to. And it was kind of interesting between these two things, who's stronger, but I think sometimes that really relatable stuff or just that day-to-day life stuff can be, because that's something people can actually, like me posting something where I'm making some exotic ice temple in Slovakia is interesting, but what can people really contribute or say about it if they haven't had that experience other than, ooh. But, so right. Your cat's getting upset and you're trying to fix a pocket and sewing is frustrating. Sewing, in my opinion, is totally underrated and people don't really value how difficult that is when it comes to construction versus like framing a house or something that we all take very seriously. But sewing, its construction in particular order, often in reverse, and you have to consider moving bodies that are on the inside of it. And sewing machines and changing the tension or having the bobbin get all messed up, like just certain situations, nothing makes me more angry probably in all of the creative things I've ever done than sewing projects can. Have you ever just lost your mind?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my serger broke and and now I'm looking for a new one because it was bad. It's sitting in the corner now, thinking about what it did.
Can you fix it, or do you have to get a whole new one?
It could probably be fixed. I just can't figure out what the problem is, which is annoying because I'm a do-it-yourselfer as well, and I feel like I should be able to figure it out, and I can't. And so, I need to just take it in, and I thought of doing that. But, I'm also looking for a new one because it's old. Yeah.
Those are pricey, right?
What's that?
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, just threaten it more. Just show it pictures of what like working sergers do, and it's just like, you will work now. Work now.
I could take a chainsaw to a serger.
Yeah, might be bad for the chainsaw, but if you haven't, well, you could just keep that broken one around as an example for the next one.
Right. I'll put it on a pike and stick it out in the yard. Right. This is what happens. This is where sergers go to die. No, that's mean. I'm sorry, serger.
I do that too. I can't ever sell my van and I've thought about this. I'm like, it's a good time to get a deal, like to make some money on a used vehicle right now.
Yeah.
And I actually need something more like 4-wheel drive pickup. But my van and I are like, what's the non-sexual form of objectophilia? That German term or whatever, people fall in love with objects.
Oh, right.
And
a non-sexual.
In love with them, but feel like a real affection.
It's a platonic.
Yeah. So far, it's not crossed any lines.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's a PG show. I'm sorry.
No,
but what I mean to say is that I have I anthropomorphize. How do you say that? Like these objects. Well, because I've spent so many hours in that van. We've had so many adventures, more like together. I would feel so guilty, like abandoning it.
Yeah, the memories.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. A friend of Brian, who we had on the podcast a few weeks ago, was saying that nostalgia is a trap, and I was like, but it gets ya. It gets ya.
We form an identity around it, our memories.
Sure. I think you could at least have a nice photograph taken and have it framed on your wall or something of the van.
Yeah, but this is where I think I might have something wrong, or maybe not wrong with me, but where I wonder about the mindset is that I worry that its feelings would be hurt.
Oh,
I know with my brain it doesn't have feelings, but it's like I would feel guilty almost like on a personal level that it felt. Isn't that weird?
It's family.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud on the internet.
No, it's like family. I remember we got rid of a white Oldsmobile convertible when I was a kid, and my dad sold it to help us to buy our first house when my parents were trying to do that. And my sister, when the guy came to buy the car and drove it away and pulled out of our driveway, my sister cried so hard over this car because it was, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the only car she knew as a kid. That was the car when she was born. We had the car, and that was the only car, and she didn't know another car. So to her, that was a family member, and so I get it with the van. I haven't, but yeah, I get it.
I don't think I'm going to ever be able to get rid of it. And actually, everyone should probably have a van, even if you have something else. They're so handy.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think it's okay if you keep it, though. There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm not sure I'll be able to not. I have loyalty issues.
Does it have a name?
No, it doesn't. I think because I was scared of this issue, and if I name it, it's even worse. But I guess I have kind of in my head given it a nickname, but I do communicate with it. Or if it does a good job, like I drive it in a way no one should drive an extended cargo van, like just a little too sporty about it. And it handles some stuff like in not off-roading, but just like, I don't know, it does a good job. So I pat it and tell it it's doing well.
That's wonderful.
Everybody needs encouragement.
I love it.
I love everything about this.
Josh said, I felt the same way about my first Jeep. To be honest, I still miss that Jeep.
Her name was Betty?
Betty was Trey.
Oh, Trey.
Trey's car.
Yeah, I had a little blue Honda Accord. Her name was Betty. I also drove her like a maniac or like a bat out of hell. Kind of didn't know where I was driving, but yeah, she and I got through some adventures that I'm not going to speak of here.
So it's good that you didn't have a dash cam recording your every move.
If Betty could talk.
If Betty could talk, she would tell you that she needs to go to therapy. Griffon, one thing that I do want to ask you, because we were talking about it a little bit before the show started, you've mentioned a few of your influences for yourself as an artist, but you mentioned one person in particular that you were really excited about talking about. About them?
Well, so there's this person on Instagram that I've been following recently, and I find his work really inspiring when it comes to this idea that we were talking about before the show of it's not just about the object you're making or the thing you're putting out there or promoting or making the thing about, right? It's also about, I guess, the mindset. And Trey, I think you mentioned I think Emily, you mentioned a video I did recently for Avatar. I carved some portraits with like the tree of life or what is the tree called again? Right. So I carved this little scene, and I decided just to talk about what I was thinking about instead of really talking about the process and just talking about this idea of sentient trees and this whole mother tree idea that's connected, but how they've discovered recently, scientists have discovered that there are these mother trees and how they share nutrients underground through the mycelium network to other like saplings, and they prioritize their young, and all these things we're learning about trees. And so that was just sort of like a kind of a tangent, really. I guess it did sort of apply to the video, but it didn't really have anything to do with carving specifically. But this one person I've been following lately, I think is so interesting, and he's really gotten some momentum on Instagram. He does woodworking and DIY type projects. I'm just bringing up, I wanted to find, his name is Brian Kleiner, but his Instagram is at, is it Lehigh Valley Workshop? he goes on these just like dark rants. That's kind of speaking to like what a lot of us are observing and maybe feeling, and especially about this idea of this like constantly just go be productive and work or be get back to work. And just like he has such this dark perspective, but it's kind of great and inspiring at the same time that he's just chosen to like jump into this like path and like put himself out there, but also not really filter what he says and like his perspective on it. And he's not afraid to say the dark thing. He's not trying to be a toxic optimist about everything. And I get really burned out on this. Like, I mean, I try to be optimistic as much as I can be because it does help to keep a positive attitude, but I don't always arrive at it. And I'm not a natural optimist. I'm probably more of a pessimist by nature. And his rants are a little pessimistic, but I will say I love how he's just working with his hands doing this thing, but talking this just philosophy at the same time. And so I've been finding that really inspiring as far as how to approach a brand. It doesn't have to be you doing a thing and you got to stick into that box, you know, like you can just, I've been inspired by him right now because I would like to start being a little bit more honest and not trying to just put on that like, oh, smiling little show kind of thing, because I'm getting a little tired of that. And I'm also kind of, what I'm not really enjoying so much about my art and my name being my business is that feeling that you need to stay on brand. Like I was saying with the stories, like I'd like to feel like I can cut loose a little bit more and just be like more natural and honest. And I think he's a great example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good one to follow if you like woodworking projects and stuff too, and watching somebody work with their hands.
Yeah. I put you said Lehigh Valley Workshop.
I think that's how you say it. But yeah, Brian Kleiner.
Okay.
Yeah. He's interesting. I think he's cool what he's doing.
Cool. We'll do that.
He's getting more and more popular, I think, because people love to hear his mind.
Yeah. No, I want to learn about it too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Griffon, I want to say that honestly, chatting with you has been incredible, and you're just as much a badass as I thought you were.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Before we kind of close out tonight's episode, I do want to ask, what are some ways that our listeners can keep in touch with you?
Okay, well, so I'm on all the social media sites that I can at least handle at the moment. I think I'm not going to jump into Be Real at this stage of my life, but trying to get on everything. And I'm half-assing TikTok, but I'll get there eventually. Everything is searchable by the same name. It's Griffon Ramsey, Griffon Ramsey. And so you can search for me on YouTube, Twitter. My website's griffonramsey.com, Facebook, Instagram. I think my official Facebook is Griffon Ramsey RT because that's from my old career. But in any case, you can probably just do a search on Facebook and you'll find my personal and my private or my personal and my business one. And as far as I'm concerned, even the personal is public because I treat it that way, you know. So yeah, you can follow me in all those places.
Awesome.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for being on tonight. You have been incredible. I cannot wait to get my hands on chainsaw. And
yeah, everyone needs a chainsaw. Everyone needs to see the Northern Lights.
Yes.
Everyone should have a van. Yeah. Everyone get yourself a van.
Van, chainsaw, Northern Lights.
And then you'll have a happy life.
Right. That's the formula. That's the secret.
Well, as we close out tonight's episode, this, along with probably every episode, is always in memory of and made possible because of Joe Capone, our moderator, fellow comedian, critic, encourager, and great friend. Find us pretty much wherever you tune into podcasts. For updates, announcements, and more, please follow us on social media under Modern Romantic and help us reach our subscriber goals. Thank you, everyone, and I hope that you have the energy to complete whatever you've got to do today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.